Good morning, lovely people. We have a packed chamber again. I welcome that. I've power dressed. I've got my Don't Mess With Me lip gloss on, so let's get the party started. Welcome, Place and Resources, Thursday, 6th of October. Our officers attending today, we've got John Selgren, the Executive Director of Place, Jonathan Mayer, our Director of Legal and Democratic and Monitoring Officer, and Lindsay Watson, our Senior Democratic Officer. Other officers, as they speak, will be introduced as we go. For those that are speaking today, members of the public, you're very welcome just to stay where you are and use the microphone. Oh, yeah, use the microphone. Now, only one microphone can be on at any one time, so you've got to press the button. When it goes red, you're live. But when you finish, please turn it off. Otherwise, we'll be in silence for could be hours, and we don't want that. So let's start. Apologies, Lindsay.
Chairman, we have apologies from Councillors Hope, Rowe and Pothecary.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, the minutes of our last meeting. Can I confirm that everybody is happy and for me to sign those? Fine, lovely. Number 3, declarations of interest. I don't want to hear about your speeding tickets. Anybody got any declarations? Councillor Alford, have you been speeding?
I don't have a declaration of interest, but I do have a personal statement to make, which is that during the course of this morning's assembly, you may hear all sorts of coughs and splutters. And I want to assure you by saying I have done a COVID test this morning, which came out negative.
I'm glad you said that.
Thank you. Okay, Chairman's update. I have got a little announcement, actually. There was an article in the printed and online version of the Dorset Echo which contained a number of errors, especially the headline and opening sentence, which I wanted to put right clearly at this meeting. The headlines, Dorset Council Committee likely to approve 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, 20-mile speed limit on every residential road likely to be approved by a council committee. Both are extremely misleading, and this is categorically not the case. Unfortunately, the Echo did not contact our comms officers at the council to check the facts, and Councillor Orrell was quoted, but he's not a portfolio holder, or he's not even on this committee. So therefore, he would have not have been likely to be familiar with the depth of discussions that we've had over the months on this issue. Comms have actually requested that the articles be retracted, and as the story has been featured in print as well as online, a great deal of traction has followed. So they've asked for a correction to be made. So I just wanted to state, there's a majority of people now who are under the belief that Dorset will become a complete 20-mile-an-hour zone, and I hope that today's meeting will make this clear. And finally, I just wanted to reiterate that this committee is not a decision-making committee. We are here to make recommendations to Cabinet, and it is they who have the final decision-making power. Right, we move on to public participation. So we're taking questions, and they are all obviously on the 20-mile-an-hour limit. So we have a number of people that are, some are here and some are not, and some are coming in online. So the way we're going to work this, if you're here and you can read your question, and then Jack will answer those. If people are not here, we're not going to read out the whole question. Frankly, we'll be here till tea time, but we will hear the answers. But all the questions are in the reports pack, and you can find everything online. So you will have seen all the questions. So we're going to start with Trevor Green. Are you here, Trevor?
Yes, still I'm here. Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is obviously Trevor Green. I'm the transport manager for Wyvern Cargo, the biggest haulier logistics company in Dorset. Obviously on the 20-mile-an-hour subject, I obviously have concerns about this in certain places where it's been suggested, but hasn't been confirmed, that we're going to put them on some of the primary routes. The particular one I'm talking about is the A350 from Shaftesbury down to Poole, effectively. though it's not exhaustive of that. So as far as our HGVs go, there will be if this happens, there will be a general slowdown in traffic and extended travel times. As a consequence, there'll be delays and rerouting, which are probably very, very costly. And these days with high fuel prices and they're going up as I speak, we've got to watch every penny we can. Another consequence with drivers' hours have increased, and there's not much in the way of lay-bys and rest areas on this route. Also, and probably more importantly, HGVs generally have a far more efficient engine than most motor vehicles. However, at 20 mile an hour, this is not the case, and I think we should consider the fact that these will be considerably more polluting at 20 mile an hour than they would be at 30 mile an hour. I also note that the A350 is a primary route, and actually I think the first signage is on top of the M4 at junction 17 north of Chippenham. So it is used by our vehicles daily, but any 20 mile an hour on this route would potentially be, I suppose the word disastrous is one I'm going to use. So I would actually request that this be considered before any decision is made. Thank you very much for taking my statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We did have some questions there. Did you want to come back on those, Jack?
Thank you, Chair. The published responses will just be read through here, and I'll just summarise the question we heard. So question one, I think the question we need to know at this stage is where exactly are the proposed speed limits? And the answer is the committee hearing is here to discuss the policy and is unable to discuss any individual requests. It is worthy to note that there have been 23 past expressions of interest for 20 mile per hour speed limit reductions, but the full demand will only be known once local communities are able to submit an application. And the second question, can Dorset Council define the term major road? The response, Dorset Council follow the DFT guidance on road classification and the primary route network. It also has local highways inspection guidance manual, and these documents will help guide the 20 mile per hour decision-making process.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Peter Mole. I've got down that he can't attend. Can I just confirm he's not here? Thank you. Jack, did you want to read the answer to Peter's question?
Happy to do so, Chair. In relation to villages, the DFT document setting local speed limits at point 132 says it may also be appropriate to consider 20 mile per hour limits or zones in built-up village streets, which are primarily residential in nature, or where pedestrian and cyclist movements are high. Such limits should not, however, be considered on roads with a strategic function or where the movement of motor vehicles is the primary function. The phrase depth of residential development has been used as an alternative way of describing village streets which are primarily residential in nature. While the DFT do not quantify a threshold for this, the criteria for a village itself is set out in DFT Traffic Advisory Leaflet 01/2004, which states that a reasonable minimum criterion for the definition of what constitutes a village for the purpose of applying a village speed limit would be that there were 20 or more houses on one or both sides of the road and a minimum length of 600 metres. If there are just fewer than 20 houses, traffic authorities should make extra allowance for any other key buildings, such as a church, shop or school. Where the character of a village falls outside this definition, local authorities are encouraged to use their discretion in deciding whether a lower speed limit is appropriate. The propensity to cycle tool for England and Wales provides an evidence base for the potential level of active travel commuting, brackets walking and cycling, and is calculated using outputs based on the last available census from 2011. Areas with short commutes and lack of hills indicate higher potential. This tool disregards current conditions. It will show what might happen with sustained promotion and highways improvements, such as 20 mile per hour speed limit reduction.
Thank you. Peter had a second question. Sorry, Jack, I should have bought some throat lozenges for you today. Do you want to give the answer to his second question?
Apologies, it was over a page for me. The response to the next part is that Scotland and Wales operate under separate guidance to England. Where applicable, the DFT 01/2013 setting local speed limits will form the basis of Dorset Council's policy. With the introduction of this policy, Dorset will see an increase in 20-mile-per-hour schemes or zones on roads where it is appropriate to do so.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Gaymol. Can I just confirm Gaymol's not in the house? Jack, do you want to answer Gay's question?
Identifying specific locations for which 20-mile-per-hour limits can apply is beyond the scope of this committee, as it would be inappropriate to predetermine a decision that may in the future be made as part of a traffic regulation order process. However, as part of a traffic regulation order process, it will be necessary to consider a range of information, including the evidence submitted within an application, the traffic survey data and information provided by the local community highways officer. This information, combined with the DFT guidance on road classification and the primary route network and the local highways inspections guidance manual, will help to establish whether a road forms part of a strategic road network or is a road where the movement of motor vehicles is the primary function. The road safety team will be available to have an early conversation with a town or parish council and or local ward members to discuss the likely success of a 20-mile-per-hour application. We always want to start from a point of how can we achieve this, but we must also be mindful to avoid unnecessary expense, commissioning traffic surveys or unnecessary time spent consulting with residents in areas where an application is highly unlikely to proceed.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Brenda Mustoe. I've got down that she's not here, but I just want to double check that. Okay, Jack, I'm sorry, you've got to come in again.
You're more than welcome, Chair.
Answer to question 4.
The priority criteria matrix is designed to be a proportionate tool for officers and is not designed to be exhaustive. Other relevant local conditions, such as lack of pavement, are likely to be a factor identified within an application, and the local community highways officers will be encouraged to consider this and any other local factors when they make their assessment to the road safety team. And the second question response is, Dorset Council will rank and deliver schemes on a priority basis within the budget, but would not be able to subsidise local town and parish councils if there are other schemes that have been identified as being a higher priority.
Question 5 is from Councillor Christopher Addis. I've got down he's not here, but can I just double check? Jack? Sorry. This question can be answered with the same question that Jack gave as of question 3. So we'll move to Becky Wallace on question 6. Becky, I don't think is in the house here. No. So, Jack, do you want to answer? Becky had 2 questions.
Dorset Police are responsible for speed enforcement operations, including 20-mile-per-hour enforcement. Speeding concerns can be reported via the Dorset Road Safety Partnership website or to the police non-emergency number 101. The concern will be reviewed and placed on a rota for investigation or deployment dependent on the nature of the report and the resources available. Community speed watch operations can be conducted on 20-mile-per-hour roads, and this was recently confirmed at the CSW police event on Saturday, the 1st of October 2022.
Slight point of order. The question was that they'd only been previously told they could only operate in 30. So I think the question was, can they operate under 20 rather than can they operate under 30?
Jack, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, the second part of that statement, operations can be conducted on 20-mile-per-hour roads, and this was recently confirmed at the CSW police event on Saturday, 1st October 2022. Yes, police have confirmed that 20-mile-per-hour areas can be used for these.
Very much. We have a question from Helen Sumbler, and I think Helen is attending remotely online. Are you there, Helen?
Yes, I am here.
Lovely. Would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yes, certainly. So my first question is that the 20 mile an hour policy states that as a guide, locations can be considered for 20 mile an hour schemes when 3 criteria apply. And the second one is where existing mean speeds provide a realistic opportunity for compliance. DFT guidance states that 20 mile an hour schemes should be self-enforcing. If the mean speed is already at or below 24 miles per hour, introducing a 20 mile an hour speed limit through signing alone is likely to lead to a general compliance with the new speeds limit. Mean speeds above 24 mile an hour are likely to require additional traffic management or enforcement measures. So this means that roads where mean speeds are greater than 24 miles an hour, where there's arguably a greater need to reduce speeds and reduce risk to more vulnerable road users, an application for a 20 mile an hour speed limit would not meet this criteria. The DFT guidance states successful 20 mile an hour zones and 20 mile an hour speed limits are generally self-enforcing, i.e. the existing conditions of the road, together with measures such as traffic calming or signing, publicity and information as part of the scheme, lead to mean traffic speed compliant with the speed limit. And the Association of Chief Police Officers Speed Enforcement Policy Guidelines state, so the police service position on all speed limits, including 20 mile an hour roads, is only introduced where average speed limits are close to the limit imposed, 24 in the proposed 20 mile an hour limit, or with interventions that make the limit clear to visiting motorists. Whereas the option to implement measures such as signing, publicity and information, or interventions that make the limit clear to visiting motorists, not included in criteria B, thus providing an alternative way to provide a realistic opportunity for compliance with 20 mile an hour where the mean speed is greater than 24 miles an hour.
Thank you very much, Helen. Jack, would you like to answer that?
The policy states that where mean speeds are above 24 miles per hour, this is likely to require additional traffic management or enforcement measures. This means that there is still an option to implement 20 miles per hour on roads where the existing mean speeds are above 24 miles per hour. However, the additional measures are likely to require physical traffic calming measures that go beyond just signage and publicity.
Thank you. Helen, you have a second question.
I do, yes. Thank you. So the Association of Chief Police Officers Speed Enforcement Policy Guidelines also state that simply altering a sign without making it clear to all drivers who may use the road that the limit is changing will risk high levels of offending, with many unaware that their behaviour who may well have complied if it looked and felt like the limit. With this in mind, has Dorset Council considered inclusion of guidance in the policy about the application of 20 mile speed limits across wider areas where multiple town or parish councils have or might be considering requesting a 20 mile an hour limit, so for example Purbeck? For such areas, clear signage and other roadside assets, e.g. planters, could be deployed at all entrances. This signage could be used to give the area and all towns and villages within the area a distinctive character, look and feel, and thus reinforce compliance with 20 mile an hour speed limits. The entry signage to the area could emphasise the many benefits of lower speed limits, e.g. safer cycling and walking, less pollution, so better for health and the environment.
Thank you, Helen. Jack.
Dorset Council will evaluate 20 mile per hour schemes on a location by location basis, but there is no restriction on local town or parish councils and or local ward members coordinating their applications. The look and feel of 20 mile per hour limits or zones is important. The points raised here are valid. However, any such signage needs to comply with the Traffic Signs, Regulations and General Directions 2016. This is not something that local authorities can depart from. The principles of the Traffic Signs, Regulations and General Directions 2016 stand alone, hence it is not necessary to specifically add this to the policy.
Thank you. Dilly Scoutside, I think you were on a bus, but I think you might have arrived. You have arrived. And I believe you want to do your statement and your question at the same time. Do you want to start with your question first?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Actually, my question does follow the statement, so if I was permitted to read the statement first, please. Thank you. I think my journey here it dictates the reason this is so important. I very, very nearly didn't make it today simply because of the active travel does not tie in with the public transport and it is extremely difficult. Right, so my statement. With an intended budget of just £75,000 per annum towards installing 20-mile-an-hour limits, the majority of residents will not get the benefit of slower traffic speed in their lifetime. Thus, the policy is already flawed by financial restraint, and it favours the wealthy, outspoken communities who can fight for and fund themselves. Despite the reassurances we were given in April that we would get a policy which enabled communities to live in the safety of lower traffic speeds, this policy criteria continues to misinterpret the spirit of the government's guidelines, and it is not the policy which will make Dorset villages and towns safer places for vulnerable road users, nor will it encourage more active travel and the far-reaching benefits that brings to all people. And if I may, I'll go on with my question. Before the committee recommends this policy to Cabinet, will it demonstrate its stated reason for recommendation, which is to ensure speed limit consistency across Dorset by engaging with the wider movement for safer roads and commit to sending an appropriate member and/or an officer from Highways, Travel and Environment to attend the National 20s Plenty Conference on the 20th of this month in Oxfordshire. The conference this year is entitled 20s Plenty, the New Norm, and it's in that word that all of this matters. This is such an important decision today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dilys. And anybody that's asking questions or making statements are really very welcome to stay through the debate and see where we get to on this, okay? Jack, did you want to come in on Dilys's question?
Thank you. And I must make it clear that responses from the officer rather than from the committee. Responses, Dorset Council is open to conversation with the 20s Plenty campaign group. We must be mindful of all travel costs and the associated environmental impact. We would prefer the option to attend the conference virtually.
Thank you. I know Giles is here. We have a question from Giles. In fact, Giles, we're thinking of giving you your own named seat. All right. Would you like to go ahead with your question?
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. That shows a certain notoriety if I get my own nameplate right. I'm here today on behalf of the Dorchester Transport Action Group and the DCAN Transport Group, the Dorset Climate Action Network. Chair, we welcome many of the changes that you've made to the Dorset Council's draft 20-mile-an-hour policy, including removing the references to A and B classified roads, which will help here in Dorchester, and removing the need to demonstrate exceptional circumstances, and the change of emphasis in the wording to provide greater recognition of vulnerable road users and local villages. However, the new plan still seems to be half-hearted in its support for 20-mile-an-hour zones by including a number of tough criteria, which include no 20-mile-an-hour limits on strategic roads, where movement of motor vehicles is the primary function. Second, the mean speed must be below 24 miles per hour. 3, the town and parish councils to pay for traffic surveys. 4, that communities must have a community speed watch running for at least 1 year. And 5, the limited funding of £75,000 per year, which was referred to by Dilys. Whilst we recognise the need for regulation, these conditions seem overly restrictive. We should not forget that the main purpose of introducing 20-mile-per-hour zones is to improve the safety and everyday experience of residents, to improve air quality and to encourage people towards active forms of transport. For families living in, say, Chiddock, who are blighted by the constant traffic from a strategic road, I can't see how they will be helped by your policy. Instead, some of these restrictive rules need to be challenged, and we should stick to the main principle, which is that the DFT supports 20-mile limits in streets which are primarily residential or where pedestrian and cyclist movements are high. Therefore, I ask whether you would consider the following amendments to your policy. First, that 20-mile-an-hour limits can be introduced on strategic roads if they are supported by the town village people and after appropriate negotiation with Highways England. I apologise for a mistake in my original statement. Two, that mean speeds do not have to be below 24 miles per hour, which was the same point made by Helen Sumner earlier. Peak speeds are much more important, and this condition should really be scrapped. Three, that surveys about car movements can be gained much more quickly and efficiently through sources such as Google Maps and satellite data. These sources should be allowed as an alternative to requiring traffic surveys run by a community speed watch group. And fourthly, to consider increasing the funding available by Dorset Council to speed up the introduction of 20-mile-per-hour zones. Thank you very much indeed.
Dorset Council recognises that speed limits can be an emotive subject and is seeking to have a policy that balances the needs of all the communities that use the roads, including residents and the various types of road users that travel on the network. Obtaining the views of all these communities will continue to be an important part of the traffic regulation order process for 20-mile-per-hour speed limits. The 24-mile-per-hour criteria is a key part of the DFT guidance. Obtaining accurate speed survey data is important to ensure an evidence base, and this will be achieved by the technical team. Human source intelligence from community speed watch groups is a useful tool of gaining additional evidence of existing speeds. It will take time to fully assess the budgetary requirements, and a review after the first year of implementation will be required to establish the benefit of additional funding for 20-mile-per-hour areas against other highway improvements.
Thank you. We have a question from Nick Ward. Can I just check if Nick is here? I don't think he is. No. Nick actually had two questions. Do you want to come back with both those answers?
Dorset Council holds collision data dating back to 1998, and this information helps to provide an evidence base for highways road safety improvements. The road safety team closely analyse this collision data, and their activity is closely focused on cluster sites to ensure we have the greatest impact on reducing collisions. Whilst it is not possible to eliminate all risks from a road, the 20-mile-per-hour policy is aimed at preventing future collisions. And in response to question 2, it is proposed to allocate an initial £75,000 per annum to the delivery of 20-mile-per-hour schemes focused on the highest priority schemes. It will take time to fully assess the budgetary requirements, and a review after the first year of implementation will be required to establish the benefit of additional funding for 20-mile-per-hour areas against other highway improvements. There will be an option for any very large-scale priority schemes to potentially receive separate funding through the LTP, standing for Local Transport Plan budget. But this would need to be prioritised using the standard LTP scheme prioritisation process. Town or parish councils will also have the opportunity to self-fund lower priority schemes that would not be delivered as part of a high priority Dorset Council programme, providing that they meet the essential criteria.
Thank you. We come to statements now. Councillor Andrew Davis, are you here? Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question really is directed to councillors of Dorset, but I will read it anyway. After waiting nearly 5 months for the revised Dorset speed policy, it is very disappointing that the main body of the policy appears to be written to justify why the April original policy was valid. The latest policy is again largely based on the outdated 2013 Department of Transport guidance, which other, more enlightened cities and towns have ignored when introducing their lowest speed limits. Perhaps reference to the new highway code would have been more appropriate in terms of prioritising pedestrians and cyclists and what they require in terms of speed limits. Dorset Highways have created a bureaucratic muddle of hurdles that make it very difficult for towns and parishes to justify the lower speed limits. For example, the need to have a formal public referendum requiring a threshold level of support of 60% from the respondents of the households affected by the proposed 24-hour scheme. I believe we have elected representative form of local government, and we do not expect Dorset Council to hold referendums to vote on every policy. Perhaps they should. Another sample of the very questionable logic of the Dorset Council proposal is saying, quote, only introduce where average speeds are already close to the limits, brackets, 20 miles per hour in a proposed 20 mile per hour area. In Falkland Magna, we have speeds of 42.2 measured on the 85% percentile as surveyed by Highways early this year. The A350 in Falkland Magna has no footpaths or verges, even though there are many houses that front onto and access it on both sides through the entire length of the village. With the village shop, the church, our school, the village hall and surgery all being on the west side of the village, the A350 remains a daily hazard for our residents, with many choosing to drive rather than risk a short walk. Understandable but absurd situation. Hence, our villages, residents, have a strong support for the 20 mile per hour limit. Chair, we don't need a scientific risk-based spreadsheet to tell residents our roads are dangerous. Just common sense observation will tell anybody that. That's all required. To have a lower speed limit, having a lower speed limit would reduce the risk to vulnerable road users. Waiting for a fatality on our dangerous S-Bend in a Falkland Magna to enable us to have a higher score on the latest proposed matrix is not a safety policy. It's a sad excuse for doing nothing, which Highways seem to adapt at. The Falkland Magna Council recently canvassed all its residents, and 95.2% supported a 20 mile speed limit through the village, and 82.5% supported a 20 mile limit on the A350 through the village. What was also very pertinent, we believe, was over a third, 34.5%, use a car in the village to make short trips to the village hall or shop because they believe the A350 is too dangerous to walk on. The Parish Council has already formally proposed and agreed a 20 mile speed limit for the village and on also the A350 through the village. And we requested Dorset Highways to change the required regulations so the residents supported the 20 mile limit, so this policy can be implemented. It is our view that safety policy should never be determined solely by the cost of change. But the cost of implementation of new speed policy, as quoted by the latest Dorset Speed Policy document, is alarmingly high at £5,000 to £65,000 per town parish. It appears to me that some council officials intend to use a 20 mile per hour speed limit proposal as a licence to print money and frighten smaller parishes from applying for its lower speed limits. These costs need to be challenged, Madam Chair. For example, there's no reason for new signs and signposts to be installed. Department of Transport approved reflective decals can be purchased in bulk at £2.97 each. I've had this confirmed by approved suppliers of the decals. Furthermore, a total allocation for the county of £75,000 is per annum for the delivery of the 20 mile scheme is far too low when there is demonstrated cost-saving evidence from many other cities and towns that adopted the 20 mile speed limit. The Falkland Magna Road Safety Group would adopt the Dorset Association of Town Councils Working Together policy and fit the decals on existing signs on behalf of highways. And all that remains then is changing the 3 on the 30-mile-an-hour road markings to a 2, a matter of a few £100s, not thousands. We urge Dorset councillors to reject the latest speed policy and instruct the officials to adopt a can-do approach by working with town and parishes to implement a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in the most pragmatic way possible. This is what Dorset councillors told us in April, and we were promised that the Task and Finish group will be set up to promptly sort out an acceptable policy with suitable input from the public. This did not happen, Madam Chair. We expect this commitment to be delivered in full. Thank you.
Statement from Chris Ashley. I think he's... are you remotely on, Chris? Yep, lovely, thank you. Would you like to go ahead?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Chris Ashley from the Road Haulage Association. We're a trade body representing over 8,000 hauliers across the UK. And I should declare that Trevor Green from Wyvern Cargo, whom you heard at the top of this meeting, is one of our members. I would just like to, by way of a statement, just support the comments that made by Trevor Green, and indeed to follow up the written comments I submitted to the council last week on the issue of 20-mile-per-hour speed limits, simply to state the RHA's position on this issue, and that is that our position is essentially the same as the DFT guidance that has been discussed so far. 20-mile-per-hour speed limits may be appropriate for some roads in residential areas. However, for others, such as through roads, additional factors do need to be considered. And as such, we ask that where such speed limits are being considered, a detailed consultation on the affected areas takes place. And at this stage, there are 2 things we would ask the council to consider in its deliberations. The first is on emissions. HGVs are designed with gear ratios optimised for running at 30-mile-per-hour speed limits, thus obtaining optimum engine performance and the lowest emissions output. Below that speed, an HGV will use more gears to maintain movement, consequently burning more fuel and emitting more emissions. The second is on cost. Haulage businesses have to take account of legally mandated driver's hours when planning journeys. Anything which increases journey times, either through low speed limits or rerouting, impacts on those driving hours. And in such circumstances, and in order to maintain the service levels demanded by our members' customers, haulage companies would have to take on more drivers and more vehicles, all of which has a cost attached to it. And we just comment that in an ultra low margin industry such as logistics, those costs will get passed on to the consumer. So in summary, therefore, we ask that where 20-mile-per-hour speed limits are being considered, because our consultation on the geographic area in question takes place so that all these factors can be taken into account.
Thank you very much. We have a statement from David Frankel, who I believe is here. Yes, would you like to put your microphone on? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking as a chartered civil engineer. I was previously a highways engineer, so I've got some expertise in this area. This draft policy was again developed without any input at all from the Dorset 20 is Plenty group. Our expertise was not used. DFT guidance issued in 2013, as has already been mentioned, is vastly out of date. The DFT have acknowledged to me that it needs to be updated to reflect current practice, as it does not reflect present government policy. This states that where vulnerable road users and traffic mix, it is mandated, and I will stress that, mandated, that means you've got to do it, that the speed limit is 20 miles an hour. The government signed the Stockholm Declaration 2020, which in section 11 states, I quote, focus on speed management, including the strengthening of law enforcement to prevent speeding and mandate, underlined, a maximum road travel speed of 30 kilometres per hour, that's 20 miles an hour, in areas where vulnerable road users and vehicles mix in a frequent and planned manner, except where strong evidence exists that higher speeds are safe, noting that efforts to reduce speed in general will have a beneficial impact on air quality and climate change, as well as being vital to reduce road traffic deaths and injuries. The oft-quoted DFT 01/2013, Section 32 of Setting Speed Limits, DFT 01/2013, quite rightly states, different road users perceive risks and appropriate speeds differently, and drivers and riders of motor vehicles often do not have the same perception of the hazards of speed as do people on foot, on bicycles or on horseback. Fear of traffic affects people's quality of life, and the needs of vulnerable road users must be fully taken into account in order to further encourage these modes of travel and improve their safety. Speed management strategies should seek to protect local community life. That's DFT guidance. So this is government policy, and yet the proposed process and accompanying flowchart takes no account of any of these matters. It gives back to the highway engineers every opportunity to reject schemes. We need an opt-out policy, not an opt-in policy. I implore this council to make a definitive decision to provide and fund 20-mile-an-hour speed schemes wherever they are requested and everywhere where people live, work, shop and walk. This is what the voters of Dorset want. Thank you.
Very much. We have a statement from Lorna McCurrock, but I don't think Lorna's here. So we'll move on to a statement from Malcolm Croft. David Franklin, were you reading that one on his behalf? Thank you.
I'm reading this on behalf of Malcolm Croft from Staple in Dorset. I was at the Dorset Police Headquarters yesterday at the Community Speedwatch Conference. All day, we talked about making Dorset roads safer for everyone. This draft 20-mile-an-hour policy for Dorset does exactly the opposite. It will be impossible to put forward a case and overcome the hurdles put in place. It must be redrafted so that we can make the roads safer for everyone and funded properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you are reading the statement for Gareth Elkins now.
Okay, this is on behalf of Gareth Elkins, also of Staple. I welcome the fact that the Road Safety Manager has included a number of clauses from relevant DFT guidance. This guidance needs to be used to make Dorset roads safer. I am particularly heartened to read his second paragraph. The DFT encourages highway authorities to introduce 20-mile-an-hour limits in urban areas and village streets where there are or could be significant numbers of journeys on foot, where pedal cycle movements are an important consideration, and this outweighs the disadvantage of longer journey times for motorised traffic. This message needs to be passed right down the chain, as this is not put into practice. We have had years of Dorset Highway staff inventing their own criteria to reject requests for lower speed limits. Just last week, a traffic engineering technical officer invented his own excuses for rejecting a lower speed limit on the road where I live by stating the road was straight, with no bends and limited properties and businesses. None of this is in any DFT guidance. I spent my life in health and safety. This is a health and safety matter. Safety considerations must be used, particularly where there are vulnerable road users on the road. Don't just say it, do it. Dorset must be proactive, slow traffic down to make roads safer, and use a global 20-mile-an-hour policy to reduce carbon emissions. Please note you won't meet your carbon reduction targets unless you bring in a global 20-mile-an-hour policy for Dorset. You need to put your money where your mouth is and fund this project properly. We don't want weasel words, we want action. £75,000 is just a drop in the ocean of what is needed and wanted by the residents of Dorset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a statement from Michael Hobbs, and I understand that's going to be read by Andrew Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of order, if I may. We submitted questions from Michael Hobbs and myself on behalf of the Parish Council to Lindsay on the basis that we expected a response, but I had no response from the question I raised. Sorry, after you? Yeah. Sorry. but I'd like to reinforce this was submitted as a question for a response as per mine on behalf of the Parish Council that I read it earlier. But I'll carry on, if I may, Madam Chair, with the question from Michael Hobbs. At your April 2022 meeting, after representations from a number of rural Dorset villages and supported by attending councillors, Dorset Highways said they were going to revisit their 20-mile-an-hour policy. It is with utter dismay, after 5 months, that they put their head in the sand and decided to do precious little to meet the requests of Dorset rural residents. Do you want to hold? Do you want to carry on? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. We took your earlier, what you felt was a question as a statement. So can you just bear with us while we just go back and look at that? Jack, do you think you could have a look at that statement again and see if there's a question in there that you can pull an answer out to? Sorry to throw this on you, but we'll come back to that. Let's go through the rest of the statements while Jack looks at that. Is that okay? Move on.
Chair, red light on. I'll continue with the question from Michael Hobbs. It is time that Dorset Executive and councillors realise the depth of feeling and the need to have a positive approach to the current problems on our Dorset rural roads. They cannot keep using the cost argument as their excuse. Other councils have managed their finances to enable them to adopt a 20-mile speed limits. The impression given is the views of Dorset rural residents are constantly dismissed despite the dangers to our rural roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Whilst you mentioned the word question in there, that was actually a statement, so that doesn't need a reply, but I think you'll find that we will do quite a little bit of debating when we've finished here. And let's go through the rest of the statements and then we'll come back to your earlier point. Okay, we have Ian Vaughan Arbuckle attending remotely. Are you there, Ian?
Yes, I am, yes.
Thank you. Would you like to go ahead?
I have been closely associated with the matter of considering applications for the grant of 20 miles an hour, particularly in villages such as Langton Matravers, where I live and in which I'm a parish councillor with responsibilities for highways. I've made previous detailed comments on the policy under consideration to both this committee and to the Task and Finish group, some of which have been adopted. Throughout this process, I've been cognizant of the need for the policy to reflect DFT guidance without compromising the principles of implementing this important policy to meet the particular circumstances in Dorset. For the want of minor changes, the document could still change the emphasis from giving the impression of being somewhat negative to being more positive in its approach to considering 20 mph. But this is not, in my view, something which should further delay implementation. Most comments made during the consultation process have been noted and in the main relevant adjustments made, so that I believe the policy is now ready for publication. Communities have been waiting a long time to be able to submit a bid to have the speed limit reduced, and in doing so make their village or town both safer and to enhance the environment in which they live. I would now ask the committee to support the proposed policy and to recommend it to Cabinet without further delays, as I believe that the policy is now fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a statement from Richard King, who I believe is here. Richard, would you like to turn your microphone?
Before reading my statement, I wish to make it clear that I am very much in favour of effective measures that enhance road safety. I spent much of my working life keeping passengers and other road users safe whilst driving against the clock. Some may consider the final point in my statement to be a contradiction to thoughts of road safety. This is a utopian vision which sadly is unlikely to ever exist. I ask you to familiarise yourself with the roadcraft system and form your own opinion. And now this is the statement that I sent in. I am a retired professional driver. I had HGV1, PSV all classes and security chauffeur. I did this for over 40 years. 20 miles an hour will work only when the mean speed is low, as stated in the guidelines, and this is my own experience. Most drivers are incapable of maintaining 30 miles an hour. So how this campaign expects them to manage 20 miles an hour needs to be explained. The only way to tackle the problem of excessive speed generally is by further and continuous driver education. Just updating the highway code and the road signs won't do it. There has to be an incentive, like retaining one's driving license. Obviously, training will cost money, which has to be found, maybe from fines. And nobody can legislate for lunacy, meaning that there will always be some who just don't care. And now the controversial bit. The perfect situation, in my view, would be a complete absence of speed limits. The roadcraft system allows the driver to determine the safest speed for any road under the conditions prevailing at the time. Thus, they're infinitely movable. The police are taught this, so why not everybody else?
Much, Richard. We have a statement from Roger Thomas. I'm not sure if Roger is here or not. No? Okay, it's within the reports pack. Nicholas Toomey? No, it's in the reports pack. Barry Roberts? In the reports pack. Dillis has read out Anna Grant's statement, I believe. No? Oh, that was your own statement. I beg your pardon, Dillis. I stand corrected. Would you like to read Anna Grant's statement?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to introduce myself, as I didn't before, I am Dillis Gartside, and I'm the 20's Plenty for Dorset county-wide campaign coordinator. I'm now reading a statement which I've been asked to read on behalf of Anna Grant, who is the Community Speedwatch Coordinator for Buckhorn Western in the north of the county. And she says, I received the background papers for this meeting earlier today, which was 3 or 4 days ago. It's a pity the council did not consult Community Speedwatch coordinators directly. There has been no time for consultation in our village, so I am submitting these 2 statements in a personal capacity. I am copying this email to the other members of our Community Speedwatch, as well as to the 20's Plenty for Dorset campaign. The policy document is very disappointing, principally because the criteria appear to be drawn so as to make it extremely difficult to justify a request for 20 miles an hour in a village, and to be motivated by a desire to save money rather than prioritise safety and the environment. Statement 1. The first criterion, A, ignores the extent to which satellite navigation and rat runs have increased the volume of traffic on roads, which are primarily residential. That is certainly the case in our village, where the roads were clearly built for villagers and other local residents, and for light local and farming traffic. It now suffers high traffic volumes. I suggest that the policy should make it clear that a 20 mile an hour limit can in principle be introduced on roads which were built to facilitate pedestrian movement and for the light traffic, even if the recent developments have led to an increase in traffic. The second criterion, B, undermines the whole thrust of the shift to 20 mile an hour in villages and small towns. Despite the risks, drivers through our village routinely drive over the current 30 limit, generally at speeds between 15 to 25% above it. Despite the efforts of the police and our Community Speedwatch team, there is no realistic prospect of lowering this to a safe speed without a 20-mile-an-hour limit. But according to the criterion, drivers are able to frustrate the introduction of a safe 20-mile-an-hour limit simply by driving routinely above the current 30 limit. The net effect of this criterion is therefore to encourage drivers to drive just above the speed limit as a way of preventing the introduction of a 20 limit. This makes no sense. Statement 2. My concrete proposal is that Criterion A should read, they are in towns or villages where pedestrian and cycle movement would be facilitated by a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on roads whose purpose at the time the existing road was designed and built was for light traffic use, evidenced, for instance, by the presence of houses close to the road and the absence of proper safe pedestrian passage. Criterion B should be removed or replaced by the following. It is reasonable to believe that a 20-mile-an-hour limit would lead to a significant improvement in the number of drivers driving at safe speeds, and the police do not consider that a 20-mile-an-hour limit would be unenforceable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And we have a statement from Robin East. I don't believe Robin is here. And finally, from Ian Bruce. I don't believe is here either. Okay, I'm coming back now to the query that was raised by Councillor Andrew Davis. I've gone through it. We've gone through it. It was actually a statement. There is no question within that statement. And I think you'll find that everything that you're talking about, we're going to be debating. So I'd like to move on to that. So we will move. Our next item is item 6, which is questions from members, but all the questions related to the next agenda item, which we're discussing under exempt business. So we'll move that to later in the agenda. So we're actually moving on now to the full item number 7. I know Councillor Simon Gibson has been leading on this and would like to present this. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning and thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Simon Gibson, the lead member for Highways. This has been a piece of work that I've been looking at since I came into my role last autumn. Prior to me taking on this role, this had been looked at by the committee and the working party before. We then looked at it again in April and then with the Task and Finish group in the summer. And I'm very grateful to the members of that Task and Finish group who cross-party came and shared their views on the 20 miles an hour policy as was. At the April committee meeting, Councillor Ray Bryan, the Cabinet member, and myself did say that we would listen to the concerns that were raised. We said that we would take them away and see what we could do. But I do want to go back to 3 of the points that I made back then, which was that anything that we do put in place has to be implementable, it has to be enforceable, it has to be affordable. I only set that aside because what we've produced since then, I think, is a good effort to try and meet some of those concerns and move the policy forward to something that can be brought to Cabinet. I think the changes around exceptional circumstances and the removal of the classification for A and B road is a sign that we understood quite a few of those concerns that were raised, but the policy still needs to be able to be brought forward. What this policy does do, it doesn't give permission for any single 20-mile-an-hour zone, or this isn't the decision-making part of the policy. It's setting out a framework that allows more applications than ever before to come forward, to get that data gathered, and then to progress the application forward to a final decision. What you have in front of you now is the most open policy of 20 miles an hour that we have had, and I hope that, bearing in mind what was said at the Task and Finish group, a lot of the concerns that were raised there have been addressed in this change of the policy, and this is our 3rd go at it now. And I just want to highlight some of the comments made by Ian Vaughan Arbuckle, who makes a very good point that we do need to get on with this, because until we extend the policy from what it is at the minute to what we're proposing here, actually it's harder now than it would be under this new policy to progress some of these applications. That's all I'll say for now. I know we're going to pick up some of the questions in the debate, but thank you for having us back again, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, we're going to open this now to debate for committee members, and following committee members, once every committee member has spoken, we'll open this to non-committee members. And I think we have Councillor Sherry Jesperson to come in first.
Get the right glasses on. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Tarrants Ward. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers for the work that's gone into this piece of work. I've been involved in this for actually some years, and this is a much improved draft policy. So I appreciate some members of the public have commented that it's taken us a good while to get here. Actually, it's taken us a very long time to get here, but that's because these things are sometimes difficult. So thank you for the efforts that's gone in. Before I make my point, I've just got another thing I just must say. I'm really thrilled to see so much considered and well-informed input from our communities into this policy making. I'm going to make myself very unpopular with some of my officer and cabinet colleagues over here, but wouldn't it be wonderful if this is the new way forward for Dorset Council? This is how we're going to make policy in the future, with this much input from the communities. I think that would be really, really excellent and would probably give us better policy. So I really would like to thank all the people, dozens and dozens of people and groups who've taken the trouble to input into this. I much appreciate it. I think we're perhaps not quite there, and I know colleagues have a number of points to make, but I have one specific area of concern that I'd like to raise, and it is this, Madam Chairman. Under Criterion C, we require significant community support. Now, we discussed it at some length in the task group, including we talked about how community support could be measured and evidenced. And as I recall, and I recall this quite clearly, we rejected any requirement for a survey or a referendum of residents. And we agreed that the parish council, or the group that was leading on this, they would be able to determine how to gather their community support, and each community it would be slightly different. It would vary, but that Dorset Council Highways officers would be perfectly capable to recognise when the parish council came forward if what they were offering constituted community support. If it was a tiny village and 50 people came to a meeting, that's community support. If it's an enormous town and 14 people came to a meeting, that's probably not. We completely rejected the idea that what it needed was necessarily a survey. We said you could do a survey if you like, from El Magna Hab, but that a survey would be required. We rejected that. So I'm very disappointed to see that in Appendix B, we've now introduced the requirement for a survey, moreover with the 60% support. This goes completely against what we discussed. I think it's kind of random. Why 60%? Why not 50%, 51% support? And there's no precedent in Dorset Council. We don't require referenda or surveys for anything else that parish councils are coming forward. We don't require a survey as evidence of views on planning applications, for example, or increases in the precept. We trust that a parish council knows its community, and if it says it's got support, it will bring forward evidence. Again, the 60% pass rate, this is random and not based on any precedent. And I have to say, I'm not even sure it would be lawful. I think to require a 60% pass rate would be probably challengeable. But moreover, I think it's overly onerous on communities. Small villages don't have the wherewithal to do surveys. What are they going to be expected to do? To put something through every letterbox and then collect it all up? It's not the way small communities do business. and it's overly complex for towns, because what's the local community? How many streets, if your 20 mile an hour is going through a certain street, how many streets have you got to include, and how many streets have you got to survey? So I think that this is bad policy. I would like to see this whole section struck out of Appendix B. I'm asking that. I think the whole thing hangs together perfectly soundly without this rather random requirement for a survey just in Appendix B, because we're only asking for it there, not under the criteria, and that Appendix B should be judged by the same criteria as everything else is, which is evidence of community support, and we leave it to the community to determine what that evidence should be. So I'd like that whole thing struck out of there, because I think it's onerous, counterproductive, and not helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Jesperson, can I just double check? Are you referring purely to the line 60% of respondents? Or are you, because there are a number of key points there, and a lot of those key points will be needed?
To the whole requirement under Appendix B for communities to do a survey. I would like, where it says this can be achieved by carrying out a survey of residents, right the way down to the threshold, and the reference to that in the second bullet point. I think that should all be replaced by a requirement to evidence community support, which is the same as we put in our own criteria, and we leave it up to communities to determine how they can best evidence community support. That's what I'm asking for.
Come back to you. I'm on page 22. Which page are you on?
I'm on page 22, and I'm on Appendix B, page 22, and where the heading is, it's under the heading community speech. It's where you see in blue it's not the heading, it's the link, and there it says an active community speed watch team in place. Yes, fine. And then it goes on to say that it should demonstrate wide community support, and then it's from this can be achieved by carrying out a survey of residents. You can leave that in, it can be, but then a requirement for that, and that it should be a 60% threshold. So I think there should be no reference to a survey of residents. We should replace that with the same criteria we have earlier in under criterion C, which is for demonstrable community support. Yes, yes, absolutely. And the wording that we've got under criterion C, which is community support, should be adequate. I don't see why we've suddenly introduced from nowhere, contrary to the view taken by the task group, a requirement to have, or even a suggestion that what you have to do is to do a community survey. That's not the way we make decisions in local communities in any other policy making. I see no reason, no justification at all for that being in there.
Now, would Jack or Simon or even Ray like to come in on this point? Who's going to put their hands up?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll comment certainly from a technical point of view. There's no statutory requirement for a survey, or the guidance doesn't say there needs to be a survey. And as Councillor Jesperson rightly says, we need to demonstrate that there is community engagement and response from a community. The reason that officers worded it this way was because we wanted to try and word it in a positive way. We didn't want to say the opposite of showing that there's 49 or 50 or 51% of people who are against the schemes. So we're trying to word something of saying that there is community support within the actual area of those houses to support that change in speed limit. But I recognise there isn't a specific need for a survey, providing there's an alternative method of community engagement. However, that shouldn't simply be down to my decision.
Are we happy? Then we'll remove that part and reword it to must be able to demonstrate community support for this initiative. Yes, are we happy? Let's move on. Who else would like to speak? Sorry, Jack, have I jumped too fast?
it does possibly raise some ambiguity about how we do demonstrate there is community support. This is guidance to town and parish councils, and I think we've been accused of not giving the town and parish councils enough information as to how they can achieve these speed limits. I do raise concern on behalf of the officers that if we've got evidence which is produced from different town and parish councils in different ways, it will be quite tough to categorically analyse those and compare those. Although I recognise it's not a statutory or a guidance requirement for a particular survey, I just think we'll struggle as officers to make that differentiation.
Presumably, this is going to come through the town or parish council, who will or will not ask this to go forward based on community support. Councillor Jesperson, would you like to come back in on this?
I absolutely would, yes. Look, I don't think it's as difficult as you might think, Jack, because I'm on many parish councils, so I kind of know how they work. Under our criteria, under criterion C, I'm on page 19, there is significant, criterion C is, there is significant community support. In assessing community support, the local ward member and town and parish council should consider residents' views to best ensure that there is broad consensus. That's the criterion that we have in place. My suggestion is that wording is perfectly adequate, and I can see absolutely no justification for putting different, more onerous criterion just in the Appendix B, which is just the bit for when town and parishes are funding it themselves. I see no difference. If that wording is good enough for the broad criterion, then it's good enough for Appendix B, which is simply about when towns and parishes are funding it themselves. I just think this whole question of the survey has crept in there from somewhere else, and it's not helpful. I couldn't support it.
Thank you very much, Chair. Speaking with Jack and with Ray, we take on board to a point what Sherry says, and bearing in mind what criterion C says, we could remove B. I'll go back to what I said at the start. We need to make some progress on this policy. So if that's what happens, then fine. But I would make one point. Well, I'll make 2 points, but I'll try and make them quickly. There needs to be a clear data-led demonstration that is consistent, because the point of this policy, going back to what I said from the start, is that it's not giving permission, yes or no, to any individual scheme. It's about providing a framework that everyone can work within, including officers, including the public, including the parish councils. And I'm bound to say, when you see something like the incorrect reporting in the Echo this week about what might have been happening in this committee, that doesn't half give you a clear steer of those who've contacted me, that there's quite a lot of people offering other views than have been expressed today here. So what we do need to do is find a way to make sure that we're data-led and we're consistent. So, and there was never a suggestion, the word referenda has been used here, there was never a suggestion of referenda. That is a misinterpretation of what's in this document. The only other point I would make as well is anything that progresses through the system will have to be subject to a traffic regulation order. These are long, technical pieces of work, and if it gets through that stage where a lot of money and time is being expended on the TRO, and there is still significant public objection to it, the processes that the council has in place for TRO assessing would require it to go through a whole other stage, which isn't particularly helpful. So we do need to have something in place that is quantifiable early. If criterion C is enough for that, then so be it. But criterion B was there to try and add some ballast to that point.
Understand entirely. Councillor Jesperson, would you like to come back?
I'd like to make a helpful suggestion which brings this together. If we went to criterion C then and put somewhere in the word evidence-based or demonstrate, if we put in assessing community support, the local ward member and or town planner should demonstrate resident support to the best of their, then you've got your requirement that this is evidence-based, this is demonstrable. And then that's a very clear sign that they've got to have done something, a public meeting, a survey or something that actually evidences. Would that help? That makes it firmer. Yeah, well, yes, demonstrable, yes. Would that work? Sorry.
I really am getting very uncomfortable that we're going against officers' guidance on this. I understand where Councillor Jesperson is coming from, and we will endeavour to do our very best to come up with a solution that, because this affects everybody in the county, we've got to take everybody in the county's view, and from experience, you get a small minority that become quite trying to think of the right word before I say the wrong word, who tend to want to make their point, but it might not be the view of everybody. We've got to be very, very careful on this. This is a major policy change that we've heard from people this morning who are putting very balanced views, and I've listened to all of them, but we now need to take this away. I've taken on board what's been said this morning, but we will take this away and look at how we can achieve what people are asking for. But the bottom line is, I will take the view of the officers who have to enforce this, and it's their view that is most important to me. They are the professionals. Sadly to say, I'm not, and not many of the people who are here today are the experts that have to deliver this.
Okay, we can still put that forward as a comment for consideration to Cabinet, and we'll leave officers to deal with that. And I'd like to move on now to some other members. Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair, and I welcome all the comments that we've had today in the engagement, because it's very, very constructive, so thank you. I've got 4 points, not necessarily my own, but I'd like to put them out there, please. They've been raised with me, and they are as follows. The community speed watch is too onerous and does not reflect community engagement. Comments for, and I've got 4 points, so I'll go through them one by one. The fact that community speed watch takes a while to set up in the first place, and this would add times to any process for 20-mile-an-hour requests. We've discussed the 60% of residents already, so that I'm not going to go there. That's done. The application document is complicated to complete and requires lots of data. Who or how will that be completed? Is that Dorset Highways working in partnership with the town and parish council to give them that data? Will this policy go before town and parish councils for their consideration, to have a look at it? It was raised earlier about the costs involved, and it seemed to be quite simple. You could just go and buy some decals for £2.97, put them up, change some paint on the road, and that will be done for a few £100s. I am aware it's a lot more complex than that. You need a TRO and publicity. Perhaps you could elaborate on that a little bit for those in this meeting and those observing where the costs are and why some of them are significantly different than others. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I'll cover 2 key areas, I think, which I heard there. One is for support to the town and parish councils, and we've got a commitment from the road safety team and also our community highways officers to work with the towns and the parish councils and the local communities. I want to make it clear, we want to roll out more 20-mile-per-hour schemes in Dorset. We want to work with the towns and parishes to make that more achievable. So that offer is absolutely on the table. In terms of the costs, under item 2 of the report, we've given a couple of examples, and I'll quote from the report. A relatively simple scheme involving only lines and signs could be delivered in the region of £5,000. A far more complex scheme with traffic calming measures would be considerably more expensive. For example, in 2015, the Western Zonal Scheme cost approximately £66,000. So this goes back to some of the mean speeds being above 24 miles per hour. If we need to put in physical traffic calming measures, it is going to be far more expensive than just replacing a few signs. But the signs are likely to probably be the cheapest element of one of these schemes. It's likely to be the advertising costs and following the statutory procedures to put a traffic regulation order in place, rather than the relatively small cost of either putting something over a sign, if that is in accordance with the traffic signs regulations and general directions 2016, which I quoted earlier, or in fact actually replacing the sign. That is something we need to look at. But yes, although it may look as simple as changing a 3 to a 2, there is a lot more behind that, which hence why there's more costs.
Jack, thank you for that. The 2 points that I'd also like to clarify, please, are who's going to provide or obtain the data that required? Because if we're an evidence-less process to do this, where's that data? Because I'm not sure that town and parish councils will have that data immediately to hand. Would that be done in partnership with Dorset Council Highways?
In one word, yes.
And the community speed watch process, is that required, necessary? Is it proportionate?
We certainly support the community speed watch process. My recollection of the Task and Finish group was that there was a strong recommendation from some people that there should be that evidence showing that local community support. So it's rather than the necessity of actually having that group in place, it's demonstrating that there's significant support for reducing speed within a particular area or controlling speed. And although it's not within the report itself, when we've spoken to police colleagues, they have been very supportive of saying that they would particularly like to see community speed watch areas in any particular zone or limit, which is potentially reduced to 20. I won't go too much into the enforcement process, but Dorset Police have recognised they couldn't be in all places at all times, and they probably couldn't be in as many places as active community speed watch groups are. Hence, it would be a great support to Dorset Police and have a greater impact in terms of enforcement.
Jack, that's very helpful, thank you. So it's not a deal breaker if they don't have one in place, but it's an advantage and a benefit if they do have one in place, and would encourage and support their process for towns and parishes who wanted to have one.
I'm quite happy to support that wording. It probably does mean a minor requirement to the document itself, but I am happy with that as the ethos.
I think evidence shows that 20-mile-an-hour zones or areas that are more effective when there is a community speed watch process in place. And I don't personally feel it's right for a community to come out and demand a 20-mile-an-hour limit and have nothing in place themselves to help that process. But are you happy for a bit of flexibility there?
I think we've covered it.
Okay, we've covered that. Right, who do we have? Councillor Alford.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think my comments will upset our colleagues on the right here rather more than Councillor Jesperson's. But I do agree with what Councillor Jesperson has been saying. And I support what Councillor Jesperson has been saying. To be quite frank, I would go a lot further. One of the things I want to recognise is the fact that we have policies such as to encourage visits, to encourage business. And all these policies we have encourage visitors to drive on our country roads. So through our own policy, we create pressure. We do the same thing with encouraging hybrid and electric vehicles. They don't sit very easily in country roads where there are walkers. We encourage walkers to promote the health benefits. So what I'm saying is that we as a council make changes to the environment that country roads work in and operate in. And we ought to recognise that rather than going back to some document of 2013 or whatever it was. So I think that is the most important comment I want to make. Our colleague here mentioned earlier on the word bureaucracy. My reading of this policy is, and I support that we have a policy, by the way, My reading of it is that this is an exercise in bureaucratic heaven. I think anyone who loves a bureaucracy will find they'll have love life with this policy and operating it. So I think that's really all I want to say. I do want to make one observation finally about the position of parish councils, which is I think that we should treat them as a customer and do our best to help them. And there is no sense that I gained in this document that we treat our parish councils, town councils as a customer and support them, help them make the sort of applications that need to be made. I think if we could do that, that would make a real difference.
I wish to go back to the Councillor Jesperson's point as well. Would it not be possible to just ask the local authority, the town or parish council, to demonstrate that they've sufficiently publicised any request for 20 mile per hour, and if they get responses, possibly look at the number of people then that were in favour and those that weren't. And I've got another sort of slight question. Exercise my democratic right to ask a stupid question. For instance, page 23 and at the bottom, please produce evidence that the application is not on a road where the movement of motor vehicles is a primary function. That is a description of a road, isn't it? I don't understand what that information is supposed to mean. There must be better ways of describing what traffic is using the road at the time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to a few of these in just a moment. Who else do we have? Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Tony Coombs, Verwood Ward. I hadn't really sort of intended to wade into this debate. On a personal note, I'm not a great fan of 20 mile an hour speed limits. Although I do support them in an area like outside a school, and I do find myself having some sympathy for Fontwell Magna. I don't use that route very often because of where I live. I tend to either go north or south depending on where I'm going to, but I have been up that road and I'm aware of the difficulties there. I think we need to send this policy on to Cabinet. No policy is set in stone forever. I do have one question in order to form where I'm going. And if we do have an application, how long do we expect the process to take between the initial application to the point of implementation? Because that will form where I want to go next. If I can have a response to that, please.
Thank you. And presumably the town or parish council will have done their work beforehand, so that application won't actually go in until they've done that. Jack, did you want to come back on timescales?
Thank you, Chair. So the question regarding timescales, I'm afraid, does require quite a few other factors to be involved in that discussion. If it's a scheme which is going to be funded by Dorset Council and it's been identified as being a high priority, that may well be different to the process of being identified by a town or parish council and then support needing to be demonstrated. Hence, there's essentially two different processes. One would obviously take a little bit longer than the other. The main requirements, I think, for putting things through are probably the advertising requirements and then going through the traffic regulation order process. So some of it's as simple as just advertising the traffic order, and I would expect that would probably take less than 3 months to get that through a system. If there were no substantial objections, then we can proceed much more quickly. However, if there were to be substantial and, objections which are substantiated, that may well mean that the traffic regulation order process needs to be extended to the point of being heard by, in most likelihood, a local planning committee. Again, that would take longer. So some of these could be put through very quickly. I would say 6 months would be a reasonable amount of time to put something through. However, if there is a demonstration from a community that there is not But if there's some lack of support within a community, it could take far longer to put the whole process through.
Okay, thank you very much for that. The reason for me asking that is that any policy we set is never set in stone forever. We always go back and review. No policy is perfect the first time we implement it. And I think there is enough here for us to ask Cabinet to take it forward, because those that are desperately waiting to use the process are being delayed, but the more time we argue over it. So what I would like to suggest that we do is we promote this to Cabinet with a rider that says once it has been adopted, that we do a formal review on its efficacy. And I was going to say after a year, which is why I asked the question about how long it would take to implement. So whether it's a year or 2 years, depending on where the best point is, depending on the applications that we've received, is that we undertake a formal review. We look at what, the good, the bad and the ugly. What worked, what didn't, and what do we need to tweak? So that way we can move it forward, we can get it working, despite my own personal views, for the benefit of the residents of Dorset. So I'd like to formally propose that, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coombs. Councillor Jesperson, you're just seconding the proposal, are you? Can I just come back on some comments that Councillor Starr made with regards to identifying a road as being a strategic function is for the car? Let's take Fontmell Magna. If we're looking at this, so what we're basically saying before we get on to A, B and C is that the following A, B and C, that it's a guide. And it also states there is a potential for high levels. There is a potential for levels of pedestrian and cycle movement. So therefore, in your opinion, Jack, Fontmell Magna would have every opportunity to apply and to be considered, would you? Would you say that, for example, because we're looking at roads that don't have pavements, so therefore they're assumed to be strategic function for a car?
Chairman, with the greatest of all respects, we've been clear from the start we will not discuss specific cases here. And the reason for that is quite clear and quite fair. There's so much work that has to go into making a final decision. Ray and I meet every few weeks to discuss a whole range of TROs, from speed limits to white lines to all sorts of things. And the amount of work that has to go into that to make a factual decision that is defendable, it takes us far away from what we can reasonably be expected to do at an overview committee. The broad principles are what we're discussing here, and I don't want to be slopey-shouldered on what I'm saying here, but you're putting us in a position that I'm afraid we can't answer today.
I accept that. I was just really looking at roads that had no pavements, but I accept what you're saying. Thank you very much. Councillor Heatley, I think you should be an honorary member of this committee, actually, because you've done so much work through the months on this. Would you like to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I start by recognising that there is considerable progress compared to where we started. First of all, it's positive, at least it starts positively. We've got the thing about A and B roads out, which I thought arbitrary and unnecessary. And, you know, we've got quite a long way. And I think there has been some response to the representations that have been made to us from outside. Now, I agree with an awful lot of what has been said by people who come here today. I'd like to see something more ambitious, something quicker, and so on and so forth. And I, in particular, support Councillor Jesperson on the surveys, and I think the idea of a review after 1 year is a very good one, because now I get the sense that this committee is now minded to send this on its way to Cabinet. I would plead that you make one significant change. I don't think that the condition about average speeds being below 24 miles per hour is a criterion, a proper criterion for deciding whether a place should have a law that says you shouldn't drive here at any more than 20 miles an hour. There are plenty of places where people are driving much faster than that, and yet nevertheless it would be appropriate to have such a law. That criterion does have some value because it is an indicator of, in a sense, the sort of things Jack Wiltshire was talking about, how difficult and expensive it might be to introduce a 20-mile-an-hour limit in that place. Obviously, if the speed's very high, probably you've got a lot of straight roads. To meaningfully enforce it, you probably need speed limiting measures and so on and so forth that would be rather expensive. And that affects the whole decision. I accept that. But it is not a criterion for deciding whether 20 miles an hour is an appropriate law for this place. I would hate to have to explain to those brave people who do speed watch, and they are brave, why, when they recorded vehicles going fast, that meant they were less likely to get a 20-mile-an-hour limit. It is bizarre. To ordinary people, it makes no sense at all. Can I make one last plea in this direction? Yesterday on the radio, on BBC, there was a lot of discussion about burglary and the enforcement of burglary and how the enforcement of burglary is not very good. And there was quite a lot of discussion about how to improve the enforcement of burglary. Nobody said, it's hopeless, this business about burglary. We'll not make it a criminal offence anymore. We'll solve the problem that way. That is what this obsession with enforcement in the criteria is effectively doing. It's just giving up on whether a place is a place where it's appropriate to have a law that you shouldn't go at more than 20 miles an hour. Thank you.
Very much. Simon, Jack, would you like to respond on that point?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's probably repeating one of the answers to one of the questions we received, that if there are mean speeds above 24 miles per hour, it would require traffic calming measures to be put in place. So I certainly don't want to exclude the possibility of an area being a 20-mile-an-hour zone purely because existing mean speeds are above 24 miles per hour. But it would mean it would probably need to go through something as a local transport plan scheme instead. I'm certainly happy to work with local town and parish councils if that is the view. However, these things are likely to be quite expensive if we're putting in place physical traffic calming measures, and also they may actually be counterproductive in terms of supporting emergency services, bus travel, that sort of thing. It's very difficult to comment unless we're talking about a specific area, but those are the standard reasons as to why it may not be appropriate to put physical traffic calming measures on some particular roads. The 24 mile per hour guidance itself is from the Department for Transport. And the Department for Transport and also conversations I've had with police have made it very clear that that is a very strong piece of guidance. The rationale behind it is because in both their views, having traffic which is travelling at broadly the same speed is relatively low risk, whereas you create much higher risks if you have traffic travelling at significantly different speeds. And the concern, particularly around 30-mile-per-hour areas, is if that people may well still be speeding in 30-mile-an-hour areas, as we've heard earlier today. If we then put in place a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, I'm sure a lot of people will drive at 20 miles per hour, but then we have a far greater speed differential, and we're also potentially risking there's greater risk of people wanting to overtake. So we could inadvertently be creating a bigger risk, and that is the information I've got from police and DFT.
Thank you, but I think people here will be reassured to know that actually it doesn't necessarily mean you can't apply. It just means that it could take longer, there could be more involved, and extra measures would need to be taken, but they could be considered. That's as I take that I believe that's correct. Okay, now is there anybody else who, Councillor, sorry, can I just bring in Councillor Tarr before you, Councillor Alford? I think you were waiting. Right, Councillor.
Yes, I'm just following up the point made by Councillor Heatley, which I think is a very, very fair point. And it does seem to me that if you adopt the idea that town and parish councils are customers in this process, it's not very far away from that to being able to say, yes, you, the town and parish council, can nominate which reasons are relevant in your locality for the need for such a situation. So I would allow a lot more flexibility and enabling our local councils to promote their interests in a better way.
Thank you. Councillor Tarr.
I would like to support everything that Councillor Alford has said. I do appreciate that Simon and Jack and our portfolio holder have a horrible job. It's a job from hell, really, to listen to all these views and try and come up with one answer, which is really virtually impossible. But the general opinions, which we've heard this morning, are not minority opinions. I believe the primary function of a village, I was brought up in a village, my father was a village schoolmaster, and that village, the primary function is for people to live and grow up and become sensible adults. It should be a good environment to live in. And in many of our villages, we've just heard a good description of one village in Dorset, and I have 12 parishes, of whom 4 have this sort of problem, and 3 want to have further say in how this thing happens. I don't know if people have realised that not one parish, well, no, the parish councils as a body have not been consulted on this policy. And I think it's very important that our parish councils are the first democratic rung in the link, and a lot of them have very good people on them with all the sort of expertise we've just been talking about. They've got retired engineers, they've got people who are working in this line. They have a very useful contribution to make, in my opinion, and the town councils. Dorchester, in my knowledge, a lot of people here say they would like a 20-mile-an-hour limit in their streets. Now, the street may well have percentile this and percentile that, but we know that people can race down that street at the 30 limit. You can't really tell if someone's doing 30 or 40, so they race down it from one end to the other. If it becomes a rat run, then even more so. So it is not safe for people to step outside their front door at any time with the kids, with a pram, with a baby, take another kid to school along that street. And that applies to 3 of the villages, well, 4 of the villages in my ward. One of the villages, they think they meet all the criteria, so they want to get on with it. I can understand why Simon and Jack and I've got want to get on with it and get it dusted today. But I think we should invite the parish councils to comment and come back, possibly after a further meeting with the Task and Finish group, to really get this right first time round, because at the moment, all the queries that have been coming up over the last hour or whatever it is, haven't been resolved totally. I fully support what Councillor Jesperson said in particular, but that is going to go away and come back in a sort of, it's going to be sort of fiddled around with a bit. But I think we should have another meeting. I think the parish council views should be taken into account if they wish to comment on this. And I'd like to propose that we allow that to happen and have defer it to the next meeting. Sorry.
I think that a number of people that have been represented along the way have included councillors. We've had a number today that have come from various councils across the country, across our county. I'm very reluctant. I don't want to put this off any further because there are schemes out there that we could get going with, quite frankly. And if we put this to a review within a year, at the end of a year with scrutiny, we could fine tweak and make any changes there. But realistically, if you go out to a further consultation, you're looking at another 3 months when nothing else happens and we have the same comments coming through. Councillor Jesperson, did you want to come back?
Just very briefly say, I agree with you, Madam Chairman. We've left it too late now in this round of the process to consult the parishes, but I think the point is very, very well made. By way, maybe a helpful suggestion would be, I seconded Councillor Coombs's suggestion that we do a thorough, deep dig review into this in a year's time, maybe we could also record that that should include going back to parish councils at that point to ask them how it works, so that we at least include some way of consulting them at that point, and that might be go some way to addressing the fact that actually we haven't formally consulted them this time.
Councillor Bryan, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm quite surprised to hear, as this has been bubbling along for some time, that members actually haven't taken it to their parish councils. So I was quite shocked to hear that the parish councils haven't discussed this, because if I look at my own, and I've got a colleague from my parish council sitting alongside me, we discuss highways issues with great regularity. So I really don't want to delay this any longer. I'm fully supportive of what you said. I think Councillor Coombs has raised some excellent points in what she said. We will review it. It could be called in by scrutiny after 6-9 months. We'll keep a continual eye on it. But I'm going to use the term, if you kick it down the road much more, we're going to reach the stage where we won't get a decision in the lifetime of this council. And then there will be delay as the new council gets to know what's going on. So I'm going to request from my seat that we don't delay it much longer. We've had a lot of discussion on it. We've come up with some good changes, and I'm hopeful I can get support from this committee so I can take it to Cabinet. And of course, at Cabinet, all members will have the opportunity to put their views to Cabinet. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Now, I really would like to draw this to a close. Is there anybody else that really must speak? Councillor Biggs, did you want to come in? Thank you.
Yes, I do. Briefly, the reason I'm here, not a member of this committee, is because there's an application by residents in my ward, which is Poundbury. I'm Richard Biggs, Poundbury ward member. And obviously Poundbury is a large ward. So I don't wish to go into detail, but I think that the point around 60% respondents, is impossible to do legally. You need a proper poll. It's going to be... Well, I'm not clear that you've said you're going to remove that. This hint of, I think that absolutely, if that is going to be removed, and the wording, it was hinted that the wording would be changed on the community speed watch to say that's a beneficial thing. But, if that was taken, I would be content. I think the whole thing could have been written on 2 pages, but okay.
I'd like to bring this to a close. Councillors, we're done. Okay, we have taken everything into consideration. We've had a proposal and a recommendation with the comments that have been made that are going to be taken back, tweaked and worked. At the end of the day, we want this policy to be an enabling policy, and we want to get going with the 20-mile-an-hour limits where people want them. So let's get going, and a review to come back in a year to see how we're doing, what we could have done better, what needs to be changed and why, and look at it again. So if we're happy on that, can I please have members' approval?
So just on a procedural point, Chairman, the proposal was that the policy is forwarded to Cabinet for adoption with a review after, at an appropriate time in the future. There was the comment earlier about the wording in Appendix B. So I guess I'm asking the proposer and seconder if we're including that as a comment within that recommendation, if they're both happy with that.
Point on that, an appropriate time is not acceptable. It's got to be within a defined period, 1 to 2 years at a maximum. It can be flexible within that, but I don't want it left completely open because it could be 5, it could be 10. So it needs to be tighter, the review.
I understand. Thank you. Are you happy, Lindsay?
Yeah, if members are suggesting the 1 to 2 years, that's what I need from this committee, is that actual specific wording. So if that's what you're suggesting, that's what we will include. So if you're happy with that recommendation with the comment, because it would be a comment to Cabinet about the wording in Appendix B.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bryan.
Yes, thank you. The clerk makes a very valid point, and it was very quickly followed up by members' comments. I would prefer that we actually state the time as 1 year review, because 2 years will take us into unknown territory. So can we stick to the 1 year review, please?
Thank you very much. Members in agreement, yes? Thank you very much. That is carried, and this... Okay, our next item, item 8, is our forward plan. Our November meeting, we have fees and charges policy coming through, and the policy on planning enforcement, I think, is going to carry over, so we won't be looking at that just yet. But does anybody have any comments or thoughts on our forward plan? Just for information, I have asked all Cabinet leads and leads whether they have anything they want to bring to us for an in-depth dive, as it were. So we're waiting on that. So is that noted? Thank you. Right, item 9. There are no urgent items. Right, item 10, exempt business. Can I have a proposal?
I propose to go into exempt business.
Thank you. Councillor Alford, seconded. Thank you. I would like to suggest we just break for a couple of minutes or so. If anybody needs to use any facilities, we'll start.